Hello and welcome to the Fertility Foundations podcast, where we go into detail about how to prepare the foundations for a healthy pregnancy. We dive deep into the underlying root causes for fertility issues and natural solutions. I want you to know that you're not alone and you're not broken. I hope that by sharing these episodes, it will help you move from feeling overwhelmed and lost to feeling hopeful and empowered to take charge of your own path to parenthood, because there are actually lots of things that you can do to help rewrite your own story. I'm Sandra Greenbank, Nutritional Therapist, Functional Medicine Practitioner, Coach and Educator, specialising in fertility, pregnancy and postpartum health. I'm also the founder of the Fertility Nutrition Centre, where you can find fully trained experts in nutrition, lifestyle and functional approaches to healthy fertility and pregnancy. You can find out more information over at www.fertilitynutritioncentre.org and also book in a free strategy call with one of our experts. Today, I'm speaking to Stephanie, who shares her experience working with Jennifer Walpole on her journey to eventually becoming a mum. This podcast is sponsored by In Vivo Healthcare, a human microbiome company. They specialize in accurate testing of different microbiomes, such as the gut, vagina, and urinary tract, as well as a range of specially curated supplements focused on the microbiomes. They support healthcare providers and their clients navigate the complex world of the human microbiomes, and is one of the most used labs and supplements by our fertility specialists. Visit their website for more information at www.invivohealthcare.com. Now let's get into today's interview with Stephanie. Hi, Steph. Thank you so much for joining me today. I'm really looking forward to our chat today and hearing all about your work with Jen. Would you like to introduce yourself briefly first?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm Steph. I am 36 years old, and I worked with Jen during my fertility journey. I started working with her, a few years ago, and then I went on to work with her throughout my pregnancy. So spoiler alert, everything has a happy ending. Yeah, and so I'm really passionate about how much she helped us and how much her recommendations and support influenced the outcome of our journey. So it's great to be chatting with you about that now.
Great. So are you happy to share your journey?
Yes, yeah. I'm also very transparent about all of it, because I do think that the more people, I understand lots of people want to keep these things private, and I totally respect that as well. But from my perspective, I feel like the more I can share things that helped us, hopefully that will help other people in their path to becoming parents. So yeah, really happy to be super transparent and get into all the gory details.
Great, thank you. What happened when you started trying to conceive? How was your experience?
Yes, absolutely. So me and my husband, we've been together a really long time. You know, we'd met at university and we got married. By the time we got married, we'd already been together 10 years. And we'd always spoken about wanting a family. We knew that was very much on our path. And around about 2020, before the whole world shut down, we started thinking like, now's the time, let's start trying. And so, you know, we did as couples do and started trying and tried not to be too crazy about it. I shouldn't say that. Tried not to be too specific about ovulation sticks, tried to just go with the flow a little bit, for example, to begin with. But the world was also going a bit bonkers. So our journey kind of was a bit stop-start. We were going into lockdown. It was like, what's going on? So, but we kind of carried on down that path for probably about, looking back, it was like a year and a half actually, before we realized this is not going the way we hoped. We're not getting the outcome that we wanted. Let's go and speak to the GP about it. So in about like autumn 2021, we went to the GP, explained our situation, and they kind of referred us to the usual tests, etc. And it was at that point, though, that a friend of mine had worked with Jen, not for fertility reasons, for hormonal health reasons. And so I was following Jen on Instagram because she'd recommended her. And I'm really interested in like the power of food. I notice in myself how different what I eat can make me feel, can affect my energy levels, like how sluggish I feel, how my skin looks, all that kind of thing. And so I thought I'd get in touch with Jen. I saw that she was posting some things about fertility, and I just kind of, in my gut, if you'll pardon the pun, knew that like, if we're going to be going down this journey, I want to make sure that I'm fully optimized, that I'm doing everything I can to make sure this journey is as successful as possible. So actually, we were in touch with Jen throughout, right from the very beginning, as it were, like right when we were having our initial tests with the GP. And it was so useful to have her as well, because she's so knowledgeable, and she was actually able to guide us, as well as the nutrition side of things. She was able to recommend like, make sure you ask for this test as well. That might not be a standard test they'd offer, but they would still be prepared to offer, because our pathway, we went down the NHS pathway. And so there was still other options or exploratory routes that she was able to recommend, for example, even in those very early stages. So we had those initial tests and really had like the full works done, thanks to Jen kind of encouraging us to ask for specific things. Sometimes you don't know what you don't know, do you? So you've got to be told what to ask for, or supported, because it's a new experience for us. And the test results showed that there was difficulties on the male side, so male factor issues, that meant that we were referred to the fertility centre straight away, so recommended for further investigations. So we ended up with that referral in, we had our first appointment in February. So it was quite quick, especially because there was Christmas in the middle. So I think we've gone from October to February, although at the time it felt like, oh my God, we've got to wait till February. But really, with hindsight, it was quite swift. And so at that point, we decided, right, there's something that's not going to work here. Let's make sure we're really fully optimizing. And we signed up to work with Jen on one of her sort of programs. I think up until that point, we'd been having like ad hoc sessions with her, like consultations. And then we signed up to work on her couples program, which we then worked on with her throughout our fertility journey. I think, I can't remember exactly what the packages were, but it was like a series of consultations looking at your food and lifestyle as well. So beyond just the nutrition. And it was, as I say, really helpful throughout that journey. So I'm just trying to think what happened next after that. So yes, we were recommended, again, really straightforwardly because of the test results, that we went for ICSI. But we actually decided, rather than going straight in for an egg collection in February, we decided that we wanted to give it a couple of months to work on our lifestyle and make sure we were as healthy as possible. We also decided to go and see an andrologist privately, just to make sure that my husband had we'd had everything checked as thoroughly as possible, and we'd like fully optimized, for want of a better word. Because I think we'd heard some stories of people starting IVF, it not working in that first cycle, and then doing a bit further investigation, and then having a successful second cycle. And I think we decided we didn't really want to put ourselves through that. So we wanted to put ourselves in the best possible position for the first cycle. So yeah, we took a few months to really work on what we were eating. And I remember my husband saying, like, well, whatever happens, we've never been this healthy. Like, we can always say we've won in that respect. We really kind of improved. We didn't have a bad diet before, I would personally say. We've always enjoyed cooking and always enjoyed like preparing our own food, avoiding processed foods, like that kind of thing. But there were a lot of hacks that Jen was able to give us, like increasing the number of colours in our diet, looking at the kind of Mediterranean food structure, it was very much focused on adding things rather than taking away. So, we pretty much, I feel like we're practically keeping like the seed industry in business at this stage, because I'm just like every salad, every cereal, put some seeds on it, sprinkle some mixed seeds, get all those healthy fats. And so we went through that process. I'm just trying to think what happened next, because as I was saying to you just before we joined the call, it's almost feels so surreal that we went on this journey now that we are in like the trenches of parenthood, as it were. And actually the support that we got from Jen, I do remember, because the male factor issue in particular was to do with the morphology results. So my husband had some very, very excellent sperm, but not quite enough of it, which is why ICSI was recommended, because they're able to hand select the top-notch sperm, as it were. But I do remember that within a couple of months of some of the changes that Jen had recommended, specifically relating to his diet, his morphology results actually doubled. I mean, they were still below the optimal rate, so ICSI was still the preferred choice. But I just remember looking at those test results and thinking, oh my God, like it's amazing that those lifestyle changes have had that impact. So it was really encouraging as well, because you feel very helpless on that journey. You feel like everything's like, you've got this thing that you want so much, and you're in this very medicalized journey, and the doctors and nurses, they're all fantastic on that journey, and they were very knowledgeable and supportive, but you did feel like you're in their hands. Whereas taking control of the nutrition, it did make me feel like I was having more say in things. So we then went through this process. I was looking back through my photo albums on my phone to try and remember exactly what the journey was that we went on. And we had our My Egg collection and embryo creation at the beginning of August 2022. And that was very successful. We ended up with 5 really good quality embryos. And again, we decided to just take a break at that point. I felt like I'd been really pumped full of hormones and everything, so I didn't want to go straight to a transfer. I wanted to do full frozen transfer process. I'd also seen some stats around them having slightly better results, but I'm not an expert on that. So I then had what I called my party month in August, kind of went out for lots of dinners, let my hair down a little bit, had plenty of wine, caught up with loads of friends. And then went back into kind of being a good girl and preparing myself for the embryo transfer, which we had in the end of October. And then in the middle of November, 2 weeks after that, we did our test and it was positive. And we found out that we were expecting our little boy. So it was practically a year from getting in touch with the GP to getting that positive test. But that to me felt like a really positive time frame, because we'd taken it steady. We'd kept our health, our mental health as well, at the forefront of what we were doing, and it had the best possible outcome that we could ever have imagined. So
that's such a lovely thing to hear. And I mean, you were also quite lucky to get NHS treatment, which I think is so more and more rare now, isn't it? Which is so upsetting for people who... Absolutely.
I mean, I think our clinical commissioning group, I believe the NICE guidelines recommend that everyone should have access to 3, or everyone that requires it should have access to 3 cycles. Our clinical commissioning group only offers 1 cycle, so it's still below the recommendations, which, as you say, I think is really sad. I do think it's unfair that there's such a postcode lottery. It was part of my motivation for really wanting to make sure that we were as well optimized and made the most of, anyone going into any journey, whether it's NHS funded or privately funded, I'm sure you want to make sure that you are, your chances are as good as possible. But I was very mindful of how lucky we were to have access to that treatment as well. We had that treatment at King's Fertility Centre. who I have to say were really, really excellent. I know they offer private treatment as well. And we will hopefully be going back there to try for number 2, because we still have some little embryos in the freezer there, but that's probably a story for another day.
Yeah, I mean, I agree that, regardless of whether it's free or not, it's not like a free cycle is kind on you physically, emotionally, mentally, and there is that element of making every cycle count, which
absolutely.
And you mentioned a couple of things, but you mentioned that you sort of felt empowered and that you were able to take charge of something where so much was being done to you, and generally it was also kind of done to you on behalf of your partner, and that can be quite disheartening for the partner as well, to kind of go, I'm the one with the sort of slightly below par sperm, and then watching their partner have all this treatment. Actually, it's something, cooking together and going for walks together or exercising together, those are nice things that connect you, and also it's a nice way to support each other without necessarily having to talk so much or sort of go over things, which I think men sometimes struggle with. Just sort of, we like to talk, don't we, about how we feel, and but actually just that silently sort of being able to like do a shop and make a nice meal and sort of look after you in that sense is a really nice way for men to actually be involved in the process.
It definitely became like a project that we were doing together. And I think if we hadn't been making the lifestyle changes and the nutrition changes together, it would have felt much more one-sided. And yeah, I think you're right. I think from his perspective, I don't want to put words in his mouth, but I think it made him feel that he was doing everything that he could as well to put his best foot forward, as it were. But we were very lucky to have the outcome that we had. But I do think that, there's no way of knowing what would have happened if we hadn't made those changes. But I personally feel like I can 100% say emotionally, it wouldn't have felt like such a positive process if we hadn't made it. It would have felt a lot more harrowing, frankly, if we hadn't felt that we had this thing that we could focus our energy on and this opportunity to influence it that we could be in control of. But I personally think, we physically, the outcome was so superb for us in terms of the quality of our embryos, the number of embryos, the success of the transfer, that the nutrition and the lifestyle changes must have influenced that. It certainly didn't have any negative impact, did it? So, it feels great to have had that journey.
It's a risk-free approach. The worst thing that's going to happen is you're going to feel a bit better.
Exactly. And actually, from like an emotional resilience perspective, because as well as the physical side of things, and I think this probably applies to like men and women, again, without putting words in my husband's mouth, but just reflecting on conversations we had, we were like anyone in our 30s. If you had a hard day or you're a bit stressed about something, often it's a bottle of wine that you open, or you slob it, and we get a takeaway, you stop in front of the TV. And we all know that that's not the best for your body or your mind. And that actually, going for a swim, going for a run, going for a walk, having a really nutritious meal, having an early night, whatever it might be, those fuel you emotionally for the process as well as physically. Because there's a lot of appointments. There's a lot of things to do. There's a lot to keep track of. There's a lot of medication that you've got to remember which you're doing when. There's, you need to be emotionally and mentally tip top as well as physically, I would say.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the way you took time, because the clinic sometimes, or your own sort of, you can do it to yourself almost, it's sort of like stress. You're kind of thinking, I'm going to, I've got to get in there. I've got to do this round. The quicker I do it, the quicker I'm going to get pregnant. I just want to be pregnant now or, yesterday. But actually taking that time, because the reason why we do it in programs like the way you worked with Jen is because it takes time for the egg to kind of develop from the embryonic stage to being ready to ovulate. And that time, it's about 3 months. And during that time, it's influenced by everything that you come into contact with, whether it's the air that you breathe, the emotions you feel, the hormones, the food that you're eating, or, any toxins that you come into contact with. So we want to optimize that. And it's the same for the sperm as well. So, that's why we always advocate taking time if there is some time. And you mentioned also you did your egg collection and then you took some time out before, instead of going straight into transferring it straight in. And that there's some research that shows that actually it can increase your chances of success. And I think probably that's because your body gets that chance to recover and replenish before from the sort of fairly grueling treatment that you've had in the run-up.
Yeah, I felt that instinctively. Again, I had read some research about that, but I also just tried to really tune into my own body throughout this process and kind of really think about, how do I actually feel? Like, what do I actually need? And I think when you can feel like you're on a bit of a hamster wheel of the tests and the this and the that and other people telling you about your body. And, IVF is an absolute miracle. There is no two ways about it. I would not have my little boy if it wasn't for IVF. And the doctors that do it are so incredible. And the whole thing just blows my mind. But I'm also a person and an individual, and I felt that I needed to remember that and be able to advocate for myself and kind of be true to what I was feeling. So yes, I think when we first were referred for ICSI and we said we would like to just take a little bit of time, I think that the doctors were quite surprised at us for saying that, because I think, there's this thing of you want to get those eggs as quickly as possible because, the younger you are, the better quality. And I was kind of like, yeah, all of that sounds fine, but we're talking 3 or 4 months here. We're not talking 3 or 4 years. And for me, I just had to follow my gut instinct on that. And they were supportive of it. They didn't try and dissuade us from it, but it wasn't something they suggested. It was something that we needed to advocate for ourselves. And working with Jen did help us to do that. Likewise, I found it very interesting, perhaps not surprising, but the clinic was very much taking a female-focused approach to the fertility journey. And so, I think the people that work, basically they kind of looked at my husband's results and it was like, that is what it is. And it was us that said, actually, we're going to go and see an andrologist. And again, they were quite surprised when we asked for that. We did ask for an NHS referral on that. It had quite a long waiting list. So we actually decided to see someone privately just to kind of speed things along, because as much as we were taking our time, we were a little bit impatient. And they were quite surprised that we kind of wanted to go down that path as well. But I think it is important to remember that it takes 2 to tango, and it's not necessarily just a female issue. Whereas like you say, I think that process when you're in the fertility treatment journey is very female focused. So it was good to take a breath, I think, and follow our gut instinct, but also follow different advice from knowledgeable people, because there is more than one way to skin a cat, and everyone's got their own pathway, as it were, that works for them.
I think that clinics generally, certainly private clinics, they are quite, because they do have their eye on the bottom line, and they have like key performance indicators they have to follow and all this. And I think, if you say, I want to take 3 months off, they might be thinking, oh, they're going to go and talk to other clinics, and we need to get this going so that we don't lose this client. Probably not so much in the NHS, but also, this idea of working on sperm health, I think that generally they believe that there's nothing you can do. So they're not advising you kind of against, I suppose, they're not advising you falsely, as it were. They just advise you on based on what they know, which is, we know we can do this and that with drugs, but we can't change the sperm health. We just know how to pick the better looking ones and inject that. But, we know now there's so much data out there that shows that there's so much you can do to improve so many parameters, and not everything, it depends on what the root cause is. But, the fact that they don't even look for the root cause, it could be infections, or it could be something structural. It could be, it could be something to do with your lifestyle. But just taking some time to think about what's going on for this person and can we fix it? Because, you did end up having IVF, but a lot of people actually, once we do address these things, they actually end up not needing any treatment at all because we fix it. So, but it's just, like you said, it's just a completely different approach, and not necessarily one that a clinic is going to even be familiar with.
I think it was quite, I found that quite interesting how little consideration they were giving to the male side of things. But like you say, they're not necessarily ill-advising. It's just that's like not their area of expertise. But I suppose that serves into why it is important. I've, appreciated and felt it was important to have a bit more diversity of thought in our journey and kind of speak to other professionals, qualified. Jen has studied extensively, and I'm sure everyone in your network has. I don't know any of them personally, but she's not just some woman on Instagram saying like, do this and it'll help everything. There is science and data in what she does. And I remember we'd have conversations and we'd come to her with results and challenges, and she would go away and look at sort of scientific papers that would then come back with recommendations and support that were factually based. And interestingly, there were, even when I'd mention these things in the clinic to the doctors, they would sort of say like, actually there is some evidence to suggest that, but it's not strong enough yet that we can recommend it. And so you're kind of, I think some of the things that are being recommended are like, or that Jen was able to advise us on were, like you say, certainly risk-free. I mean, no one's ever going to be in health issues because they had a few extra tomatoes or whatever, but have the potential to make positive impacts. And I think it might be interesting to see how things kind of get implemented more widely over in future years. So I think, as an example, I didn't end up having a vaginal birth because I had a low-lying placenta. I had to have a planned cesarean, but there's something around eating dates in the run-up to your vaginal birth that can help, I don't know, ripen the cervix or something like that. Anyway, and I think it's really interesting that now that is something that midwives will mention as well. They're like, oh yeah, there's enough evidence coming in that they're kind of talking about it. Whereas maybe a few years ago, that was a bit more on the quote unquote old wives' tale end of the spectrum, or just something that a nutritionist might recommend. And now it's seeping into kind of wider public knowledge. And so these things get there, and it's quite interesting to just be a little bit ahead of the curve. That said, I did also engage with all the old wives' tales. Like, I know that even Jen would say there probably wasn't any evidence for eating a pineapple on the day of your transfer, but pineapple's delicious. So I was just going to do it anyway, just in case.
Yeah,
just in case.
Yeah, there is. I mean, the British Medical Journal wrote about this a couple of years ago, and this is a very well-known fact that research doesn't make it into clinical guidelines for about 20 years.
Oh, wow.
A new piece of research will come out, and then it takes, we need more research, and then the WHO might change their guidelines, the NICE guidelines might change, but they're not reviewed. They're reviewed once in a blue moon, and then once the NICE guidelines are changed, each hospital then might take a few years to change their guidelines. And so by the time, and from our point of view, we're looking at the research that's coming out now. We're thinking, oh, hey, we've seen this thing about using, for example, saffron for depression at the moment is there's quite a lot of research coming out. And at some point in the future, drug companies might even begin to use saffron as a sort of basis for their drug manufacturing or whatever. But, we don't have 20 years to wait when we're trying for a baby. So what we're doing is looking at what's going on, looking at, grassroots research or things that are coming out, and we're implementing it now. And we might even be asking questions or sending, a letter to your consultant with a copy of a couple of studies and say, hey, in your opinion, do you think we should try this for this person? Because it has to also be individualized. It might be important for one person, it might not be for somebody else. So it's really interesting.
I had no idea it was 20 years. I think as I was saying that, I was imagining it would take 3 or 4 years maybe, and that seems like long enough, but 20 years is a very long time, isn't it? That's wow, I didn't realize that.
I mean, that's why it's so important to I think, speak to somebody who can dissect and look at you as a couple, look at what's going on for you, your history, your presentation, consider what's going on, and look at what might possibly work. And, a lot of the time it's like, we don't know if this is going to work, but it sounds quite good. Would you like to have a go? And, making those decisions together, or, should we have a conversation with your clinician, or, like you went to see an andrologist, which, there are a few that we work with a lot that are just incredible. But again, there's so few and far between that knowing somebody who knows the right person is even...
Precisely, yeah. And can recommend someone that, is actually going to engage with the approach that you're taking as well. I can't remember the name of the chap that we went to see, but he was recommended by Jen and he was fantastic. It's just, you don't know what you don't know. Like, I didn't even know the word andrologist before she suggested we should see. I know about gynecologists. Like, I didn't know that. I mean, obviously there's an opposite, equal and opposite to that, but I didn't really think about it before this situation. Yeah, and I think the support that Jen was able to give as well was so practical. Like, even when we'd sort of say to her, like, I think perhaps it maybe before speaking with her, I might have been skeptical that she was going to say, like, basically you just need to eat like brown rice and broccoli and nothing else for the next 6 months, and just don't leave the house and only drink filtered water and blah, 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 blah. And instead it was much more, we'd say to her, oh, we really like batch cooking, or, my husband's a big snacker. We need some advice on what he can snack on that isn't like, I don't know, a Mars bar or something like that. And she'd come back with like loads of recipe suggestions, and it made it kind of practical and realistic for kind of our actual life. Because, you still have to live throughout this process. Because as I say, our journey was a year, and then it could easily have been longer. And like, you've still got to, for me, I still had to live and carry on with, the real life, as it were. Because you just don't, nothing is guaranteed either, unfortunately.
Yeah, and I think that if you're going to make changes, changes are hard. It's really, really hard. And there's no point recommending things that you're not going to be able to stick to, because then it's not going to happen, and it's that emotional piece as well of, feeling like you failed, or, and that's another reason why it's so good to see someone regularly, because you can go through everything regularly, check in, how did that go? What can we do differently? But I think also, I think a lot of people just go, why would I see a nutritionist? I already eat vegetables, but there's actually so many other things that happen that you take a leap of faith and you don't know before. I wish I could sort of find a way to explain to people what it is that we do, because even the name, a nutritional therapist, it's like, or a nutritionist, it infers that you're just talking about food, which is not even true.
Yeah, I know, because I think that's why I always talk about the lifestyle changes as well, and kind of how, because food is like part of your life, I think, is the way that it kind of looks at it. Just like, not just the actual food, it's, when are you eating, and then kind of what exercise are you doing and how is that impacting on your hormones? And, you know, are you having acupuncture or are you doing XYZ? Or, but it's interesting as well because I said before, my husband said, like, well, whatever happens, we're healthier than we've ever been. And so many of those changes that we made, essentially because we were on this goal of wanting to have a baby, but they do make you feel better. And we're still doing them now. And it's, you know, my little boy even has, we pulverize them because he's not yet one, so he can't quite handle all the mixes, but we'll sprinkle we call them his baby sprinkles, and we put them on his Weetabix and porridge in the morning. And he's one of the first foods that he had was sardines. He loves sardines, loves oily fish, and it's things that were like not in our diets before we had that journey, and now are transferring into him because that's just how we eat now. That's the stuff that we have in our cupboard.
Yeah, it's so fun. It's so interesting talking to you because there's all of these things that I've always been thinking of coming back to me. Like when I started out as a nutritionist, like a really long time ago now, I was like, I want to change public health. And I thought, how am I going to do this? I'm actually going to start, because we can do so much to change a person's future health risk by working with the parents before they get pregnant. So it's all about the epigenetics and influencing how the genes are expressed in you to improve, you know, risk of heart disease, risk of diabetes. So you've done a really good thing for Sebi, where you've actually improved his future health into old life.
What a lucky boy.
Yeah. But you know, we can prevent allergy or the risk of allergies, or you know, reduce the risk of allergies, reduce risk of metabolic disease. And you know, this is all in the literature. Like, this is not making this up. But and the other thing is, when you know what you know how to play it up now, which is something that we go through with every single client. You know, find your protein, find your fat. You know, what vegetables are you going to do? Are they, you know, leafy vegetables, or, you know, how much starch, and what colors are you looking for? And these are the basics that we go through with everyone. But sort of once you know it, you can't unknow it. And so you bring this into your family. And then when your children, you know, hopefully at someday will have children, they will bring it. So the ripple effect is actually huge.
It's such a good point. It goes right down to like, I do love seeing like how, I'm sure he'll have his fussy eating phase.
They all do.
You know, and don't get me wrong, he's still, I mean, as much as he has his baby sprinkles and his, you know, sardines, he'll also go bonkers for a banana or a, you know, something like that. But it's also kind of interesting that like we're very mindful of, well, actually he's had like half bananas today. Let's like give him something else. Let's make sure really mindful of variety, for example, because that was something that I think we spoke about a lot with Jen. It's so easy to get into food ruts, for example. I think before we were working with her at the beginning of our journey, yes, we had essentially a healthy diet, but we were really in our food ruts. You know, our shopping list every week was the same vegetables. We weren't mixing it up. We weren't, you know, getting, you know, it was the same. Like, you just go in your routine around the supermarket. We weren't thinking, oh, let's get some kale this week, or let's try something kohlrabi this week, or whereas now I think so much more mindful of variety and trying to keep it a bit fun. And that's great as well, I think, when you are starting to wean, because you're just immediately exposing them to more stuff, because it's easy for you to offer that. If you're familiar with cooking XYZ, it's much easier to bung a bit on their plate as well.
And there is some data to support the idea that what you eat in pregnancy influences your child's taste buds and wanting to eat.
Yeah. Although I did eat quite a lot of ice cream during pregnancy as well as all the healthy stuff. But it was very hot last year. It was a very, very different summer to this year. But yes, I think I'd read that as well, and I do find that quite interesting. And I think this might be an old wives' tale, but I also was very mindful to keep as appropriately active during pregnancy as possible. And Seb is now a very active child, and people often say to me, like, did you exercise a lot while you were pregnant? Now, I don't know. I don't think that. I think that's just a coincidence, but it's certainly, He's certainly got good energy levels from somewhere. But I did also enjoy, again, I worked with Jen throughout my pregnancy after having a really positive experience with her during the conception. I then sort of had a few consultations during pregnancy and kind of figuring out how to keep those energy levels up, how to stay active and appropriately. I, again, felt like stood me in really good stead for that postpartum period as well, because that's really hard. Like, I ended up, as I say, having a planned cesarean for medical reasons, but I was very lucky to have a pretty straightforward recovery, thankfully, because, you know, you don't have much time to, although you deserve it, you deserve to have a lot more time than we are afforded to recover from birth, whether that's vaginal or cesarean. But yeah, you're pretty much just thrown in the deep end. You handed your baby like 5 minutes later and told to crack on. And I'm pretty sure that having maintained my health throughout that journey as much as I was able to, did ease my recovery and did stand me in better stead for the journey, as it were, ahead.
Yeah, I mean, we always say that as long as mum is well, baby will be fine. So we look after mum before pregnancy, during pregnancy, making sure that you get everything that you need. Because if you're deficient in something, generally baby will get what they need at the expense of mum. So making sure that you're eating really well, and you know, and that can be really challenging when you're feeling sick, or then later on your stomach is squeezed because your belly's so big, or you know, things you can't stomach the smell or whatever it is. And it's just making sure, again, just finding those little hacks where you're like, how about you just try this or try that, or you know, we want to make sure you're getting all your omega fats for baby's brain to develop properly, but also for you to not get sort of baby brain, or sort of, I mean, we always lack of sleep, but you know, and making sure that you're not crashing, because if you crash, you know, it's just going to be an awful time for the rest of the family, including baby, and you know, your milk might struggle then to come in, and all of this. It's really important actually to get that support, and I think you've done all the things. Clearly, you've done all the things right. You know, with your
hopefully
decision making.
Well, we're still also like mad batch cookers. That was my big thing. I always liked a bit of a batch cook, but then I think like I actually, when I was pregnant, we bought a new freezer. We only had one of those like upright freezers in the kit. I was like, this is not going to hack it. I need a chest freezer. Okay. This is the level of batch cooking we are going for. Yeah. So we got and the only place we had for it is in the shed. So I had to get a power line put out. I was like, I need this for my motherhood journey. Power line put out to the shed, got a chest freezer in the shed, and just, that was my version of nesting, I think. Like, I spent several days, with hindsight, completely bonkers, heavily pregnant, cooking these massive vats, basically, of like, if you're going to cook once, cook double or triple, and just bung it in. And that got us through that postpartum period as well.
Really good idea.
It was like having, and we still do that. I do that now for my son as well. Like, it's like having a ready meal, but it's done, you know, for yourself. So if I'm cooking something now, I'll freeze some for us and then freeze some mini portions for him as well. Which is, yeah, again, it's these habits that when you actually form a habit, it sticks with you. And I think we often talk about habits in like bad habits, but actually positive habits stick with you as well. Yeah,
we call it habit stacking. So like one thing and then another thing. But yeah, you're right. You know, cooking when you have time so that you can eat well when you don't have time to cook is such a good strategy. And it does take some planning. But, you know, and it can save you money as well, because buying in bulk, or, you know, certainly if you've got a farmer's market near you and going near the end and just buying up like trays of what's left, you know, what things that the farmers.
Oh, that's a good idea. I never thought of that. That is a good idea. Yeah, that's a good trick. I mean, I remember that one.
All right, so nice to talk to you. So what do you have any advice for somebody who's kind of maybe where you were at the start of your journey and feeling lost and not knowing what to do, and you know, what would be your advice to your former self?
My advice to someone in that situation would be to find things. I mean, for me, the nutrition journey was excellent. I personally advise that, but at the core of that is find something that, you know, you can feel you have control and power over, because it can feel like quite a powerless process. So whether that's optimizing, like looking at your nutrition, looking at your fitness, maybe there's a type of exercise that, you know, you really want to work on, or maybe it's that you want to start doing some meditation or mindfulness, that things like that have been shown to have a positive impact on that journey, but that you can actually control outside of the medical setting. Find one or many of those, I think, can really help. I think speak to experts, and I use the term experts carefully, like proper experts, not people that think they're experts. Do make sure people are qualified, because unfortunately there probably are a lot of people throwing around questionable advice. But if you speak to qualified professionals, it's good to have diversity of thought and opinion, and then make your own judgments, and advocate for yourself as well. Think about what feels right for you, what doesn't feel right for you, because it is an individual journey, and you know, nobody knows you as well as you do. So take on board the advice and the wisdom from the experts, but do take time, if you have it, to reflect on it yourself, and don't feel like pressured into decisions. Those, I think, that's what I would advise. But yeah, because it's a tough road. It is a tough road. Like it's very easy. I say very easy. Like now, I kind of look back on it like quite wistfully, because I had such a positive outcome. But actually, when I was preparing for this conversation, I was looking at some of the photos that we'd taken, because I tried to keep a record, so that one day when my son sort of asked me, where do babies come from, you know, I can tell him, like, well, there's lots of different ways that babies are made, and you know, this was how you were made. But it's sad. It was a hard, sad time. There's no two ways about it. And trying to keep yourself strong throughout that is an important thing to do.
Great, thanks so much. It's all of everything you've said, you know, it makes my heart sing, like your journey and your takeaways, and, you know, just so grateful that you've come here to talk about your experience working with Jen as well, because I think that it will really help other people who are feeling how you felt at the time. And, you know, I am 100% biased, but I also know that what we do makes an enormous difference. And it's, you know, one of our main problems is sort of helping people understand what we can do, and, you know, that there are ways that you can take control as well. So it's so lovely to hear from your experience, and yeah, I'm very, very grateful. Thank you.
Oh, it's a pleasure. I'm glad to share our journey, and I hope that, yeah, as you say, I hope that it can help some other people that are where we are, and hope helps them reach their happy endings.
I really enjoyed this chat with Stephanie, and I hope you enjoyed listening to this episode. Please like, share, save, and rate this podcast if you found it useful, as it helps us reach more people. And if you're looking for a fertility specialist to support you, our practitioners can be contacted over at www.fertilitynutritioncenter.org. They will offer a free strategy call to help you decide on your next best steps on your journey. Thank you for listening.